What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Closing the Deal. I am one of your hosts, Zach Dixon, and sitting across from me is my co-host, Sam Enright. What's going on today, Sam?
What's going on, brother? How are you?
Same old, same old. Super excited to be behind the mic and behind the camera recording today. I'll tell you that, though.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was excited as well. It's been a good day so far.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
I think we lucked out. I know we were supposed to go hit the links after this. But I think that would have been a sloppy mess. I'm not going to lie to you at this point.
Yeah, it was. I checked the weather a few days ago, and it was not supposed to rain until like the nighttime today, and so that was what led me to book the tea time. But I woke up and it was pissing rain, so that definitely threw a wrench in that plan.
Yeah, I think it probably would be your favorite thing. It would definitely be cart path only. There's no doubt about it.
I would have definitely called if we didn't already make the decision to chalk it. I would have definitely called and immediately chalked it right then and there if they told me cart path only. It ain't worth it.
Well,
It ain't
I'm
worth
actually pretty sure the course that you were taking us to, I think they're like, I don't think they allow cart path or carts off the path until like May. Like, even if there's no rain, I really don't think they do, just because like probably like for the growing back process of the course, like just to keep it, because you come out of winter, the grass is dormant,
it.
that sort of thing. So I would venture to say, because I feel like every time we go out there in the spring, like you're never like, it could not have rained for 5 days straight, and like the sun's been baking it out, and it's like, oh, cart path only. But I think that they do that too. But then again, I mean, if it helps sustain the playability of the course in the long term over the course of the summer, like to do that, then that makes sense. Like, to me at least. I mean, I know it's not fun, but
I agree, and some courses are a little bit more built for cart path only. Unfortunately, that course is not,
yeah,
not at
no.
all.
It's just
It's a very
big.
difficult track. Yeah,
Yeah. A lot of
I
walking.
yeah, I think my solution that I thought about this winter time though is to bring the little like carry bag, and whenever I have a shot that's like 100 yards across the fairway from the cart path, throw a couple clubs in there and take the carry bag over to the ball, instead of having 5 clubs lugged over my shoulder with my rangefinder and a couple balls and whatever it may be. Just have that small little carry bag and throw the clubs in there.
That's actually a good call because, yeah, I bought that thing last year and didn't even use it. I bet it's literally still sitting in my closet. Every time I get my clubs out, the little bag falls over, and I'm constantly reminded of like, why did you purchase this? You've not even used it.
That was for the minimal mammal, no?
Well, yeah, it was, but it was also, we thought that we were going to take them to on the bachelor trip,
Yeah, you're
but
right.
then we
Yep.
realized that Pinehurst gives out their own little bags for the um
The
God, what
cradle.
was it? Yeah, the cradle. So we're like, and we were already short on space as is in that trunk. So I mean, not bringing those was probably a good call. So yeah, and then yeah, it was for the little short par 3 course that we have that we literally went to 0 times last year. So
I went once. by
hey,
myself.
look at you go, bud. I don't think you're going back this year. That's for sure.
I
I
can
th-
confirm not going back there.
yeah, I think that one went away.
Ship has sailed. Ship has sailed.
Oh well.
What do we got going on today for today's episode? What are we talking about?
Today we are doing a little bit of a, I guess, kind of a personal episode, but also a little professional, but we're talking pet peeves. We thought this might be a good little episode to do. Maybe some things to avoid. I know this is going to be, industry kind of specific, but also just a little bit specific to just our experiences as well, working with clients and, kind of the stuff that we see that can definitely be avoided. And a little bit of it, kind of falls back on us as well. So, I mean, speaking for myself, I know, what I have to talk about, kind of falls back on me a little bit, but just kind of some different things that we've noticed throughout our time in the industry and, things that normally get most people worked up. But I guess maybe the whole premise of the episode is really to just kind of bring to light some of these issues. And then that way, when you go into when you go to buy a home, when you go into this process, you are clear on what those expectations are and that these things are just part of what it is. And yes, it bothers everybody involved, but at the end of the day, we just kind of got to suck it up and deal with the fact that this is just the reality of the business. So that's kind of the point, and maybe have a little bit of fun with it, get some laughs out there, just about, kind of our different experiences of what's happened. So
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, just having the people hear about these things before they get into the process and start to do some of them.
yeah.
It can obviously just alleviate headaches on all sides of the aisle. Just make sure that everybody is prepared for what's about to happen and how to react when those things do happen. So
Yeah, no doubt, man. No doubt. Well, I mean, we basically have the episode structured. I mean, we're both going to, kind of talk about two pet peeves for ourselves personally, just on each side of the aisle, the real estate and the mortgage side, and just give you guys little insights into each of those. And yeah, hopefully you guys find some value in the episode. So, uh, getting things kicked off, I'm going to start with my first pet peeve. This is actually more industry specific, and it's kind of my pet peeve with the industry as a whole. And that is the amount of paperwork needed in order to get a mortgage. So I know that we've talked about this several times, and I know that we've used comparisons like they're going to ask for like your firstborn, everything short of your firstborn child in order to get a loan. And I know a lot of people think that that's probably an exaggeration. And I mean, obviously it is a little bit, but seriously, this is something that is very common in the mortgage business. It not only takes me off, but it takes the clients off. It takes off everybody involved. I'm just gonna be honest with you. I mean, this is probably the number one complaint that we get when working with clients who are just like, why is all of this needed? Why do you continue to ask for this documentation? And that sort of thing. And obviously, I just want to say first and foremost, I agree with you. I don't want to be asking for it. I don't want to be coming back to you 4 times for separate pieces of documentation. Trust me, it does get old, but unfortunately, it is just part of the process. It's part of getting a home loan. They are going to ask for all sorts of different things. The mortgage business is all about paper trails, and it has to be so clear and concise. There is no room for gray area. Like, it literally has to be black and white. And if it's not, they're going to ask for more documentation that helps make the picture black and white. So, that's one of my biggest pet peeves personally. It gets old having to continuously go back to clients and ask for more and more documentation. And yeah, it's just part of the business that unfortunately we can't get away from. So, I know, again, lots of clients, will come back because I'm usually the guy in the process who's communicating with you throughout the entirety of the time. So I'm usually the one who's asking you for this stuff. And so when you have the same person asking you for different documents, 1 week and then the next week and then the next week after that, it just, it can get frustrating for sure. But it just is what it is. If you own multiple properties, if you're somebody who, you know owning multiple properties just by itself is going to get you in a world of documentation after documentation, because we have to document everything that goes along with that property: mortgages, taxes, insurance, the whole nine. So it just depends, how much you have going on. We have clients that sometimes we ask for the bare minimum things in the beginning, and then we need nothing else from them. Like, I literally we got a loan out from underwriting yesterday, and we're working with a lady who all I had to ask her for was for her to get her homeowner's insurance. That was literally it. There was nothing else that came back on the conditional approval that I needed to get from her. You have clients like that. Then you have clients where the conditional approvals, 30 long, and 15 of them are all client specific documents. And some of those are going to open up a can of worms that is then going to ask us to get more documents within those documents. And it's the nature of the business. So again, they're going to definitely look at everything. And again, it has to be black and white. No room for interpretation, no room for gray area. If you can't look at it and know what it is, what it means, we're going to be coming back for more documents. Just going to let you know.
I can confirm this too because at one point during our home purchase, my wife is saying to me, "I didn't I already send this? I got to send another document? Are you kidding me? Didn't I already do this?" I'm like, "No, you didn't already do this. This is all for a reason. We got to get this in. Do you want to buy the home or not? We got to do it." So it is. I've had firsthand experience of just clients being a little bit annoyed that they're continuing to send documents, but again, it's much needed. um, I guess my only question is, why is it needed? What prompted this amount of documentation to be needed in the home buying process?
Well, things used to be a little bit different, back, I guess, what, at this point, 15 to 17 years ago, before the mortgage meltdown. That happened in 2008. But, they used to give people, like Zach said, I think you mentioned this in a movie, or not a movie, in an episode before, but the movie The Big Short kind of, highlights this. And there's a scene where they're talking about, basically creating pay stubs and creating documentation, to get these clients loans, with absolutely zero regard for whether or not they can afford the payment or anything that comes along with it, because it was a turn and burn kind of game back then. You know what I mean? And so that is not the case anymore. There's been so many regulations and guidelines put in place to avoid that. Ultimately, I know we've touched on this, in an episode before, but really what it all boils down to is the bank is not in the business of holding on to real estate. They don't want to own your property. They don't want any of that. What they want, and where the bank makes their money, is charging you interest over the life of a loan and you paying them that interest. That is where the bank's money comes from when you purchase a home and have a mortgage. They want to be able to collect that interest and put money in their pocket every month. They do not want to have to come foreclose on your house and take it from you and then become the real, hire a real estate agent, get the property sold and deal with all of that. That is not what the bank is in the business of doing. And so when you think about it from that perspective, their ultimate goal is to make sure that when they give you this loan, that you are going to pay it back. And there's no way to know for 100% certainty that that is going to happen, but they're going to leave no stone unturned in making sure that they have done their due diligence to make sure that you're going to pay the loan back. And another thing that we talk to people a lot about, and I always, because again, this is something that annoys me. This is the reason it's on the pet peeve list, is because I can't stand the amount of documentation and things that, as a common sense human being, that I see sometimes. And I'm like, okay, this makes sense to me. But again, if it's left open for interpretation, if you could interpret it another way, but I'm choosing choosing the path of interpreting a certain way, you know, I'm like, this makes sense to me. And then you send it to the underwriter and they're like, well, it doesn't make sense to me. There's still too many gaps in this. There's still, what if this is what's going on? What if this is what's happening? And so I got off my train of thought there, but ultimately, again, they're wanting to make sure that you can afford to pay back that home. And, the way that they do that is by gathering as much documentation as humanly possible. And so ultimately, the reason they leave no stone unturned, and I, again, I like to say this to our clients, is because you guys have to look at it from this perspective. When you engage in a mortgage transaction, you are communicating with a loan officer and sometimes a loan processor, loan officer assistant, that sort of thing. But the people who are ultimately giving you the money, the investors that are investing in this loan, the underwriters, they are never going to have a conversation with you. They're never going to meet you. They don't know anything about you other than the documentation that is put forth in front of them. And so that's one of the hard things that people don't understand, because when they look at their own documentation, they're extremely biased. When you look at your pay stubs or you look at your W-2s, you look at it and say, this makes perfect sense to me. I know that I'm at work this amount of time. I know this. But for somebody who's not you, how do they know other than what they are shown? And if you're saying, dude, I work 40 hours a week every single week, and then we get 4 pay stubs that don't show 40 hours, you can scream at the underwriter till you're blue in the face that you work 40 hours, but the documentation doesn't support that. And they don't know you. So they're going to go off the documents that say, this person's not working 40 hours. They can say anything they want, but that's not what the documentation shows. And so it's things like that that oftentimes people, when they think about documentation, when we talk with them and have that conversation, they look at it from their own perspective. And so I would just strongly encourage you guys, when you do go out and get into a mortgage transaction, be easy on your loan officers, be easy on your loan processors, everybody involved, because ultimately I can guarantee you, if they're anything like me, asking for documentation over and over again is not fun. It's not something that you want to be doing, mostly because it does annoy the other person, and that other person usually is going to express that annoyance to you. And so, you don't want to kind of be the dumping ground of somebody being ticked off that you're asking for this stuff. But again, it's something that's required. So again, think about it from the perspective of whoever's giving you this money is never going to meet you. They're never going to have a conversation with you. They're never going to be able to judge you based on your character of who you are. All they're going to have to work off of is the documentation that you present in front of you. And if that documentation doesn't make sense, it's hard to build a case for those sort of things. So give your people some grace, because a lot of people in this industry, I'm sure, don't enjoy the fact that there's the level of documentation that is required. But again, it's in the loan guidelines. We're required to do it, and so we're going to continue to do it. And we try to be as thorough as we can up front to help avoid that. But just something for you guys to think about.
Great info for sure, because again, it is vigorous. It is vigorous, and you just gotta, if you want to get to the end goal of purchasing your own home, you got to do it. You have to do it, unfortunately or fortunately. So, and looking at it from the fortunately side, you don't want to be into a situation where you're going to be underwater right away too. So the underwriting is there to protect you as well, to be honest with you, because you want to make sure that you are going to be in this property and have success with it, and not immediately fall underwater because you got into something that you couldn't afford or you couldn't handle in general. So
Yeah,
documentation is there for both parties, for sure, for sure.
absolutely. And it's just like, you know, we go to bat for a lot of our clients, and if every deal was required to be cookie cutter in order for it to get done, if everything was as simple as get some pay stubs, get some W-2s, get a purchase contract, get an appraisal and title work, and there was no questions asked throughout the process, a lot of people would not be buying homes. Let's just be honest with you. A lot of the times we have to go to bat for our clients, and we have to make situations make sense, and we have to get VOEs, and we have to get all of these different pieces so that the pieces of the puzzle make sense to the underwriter and to the investor. And ultimately it's for a benefit of you, the client. We talk about this a lot. This is Zach and I are commission based people. We don't get paid unless this deal gets done. So there's no reason that I would want to drag you along on this process, collect as much documentation as possible. It's not like I'm gaining something from it if the loan doesn't close. You know what I mean? So it's something that we also talk to people about, because sometimes they're like, why do you keep asking for this? Why can't we just close the loan? It's like, trust me, if we could just close the loan, we would just be closing the loan. You know what I mean? But again, you know, we're doing this to help you guys, and to ultimately make your dream of buying a home come true. And sometimes, depending on your situation, a little bit of extra legwork is needed. And the easier and better that you are with cooperating with that, the better the process goes ultimately.
Definitely, definitely. So moving on to my first pet peeve, it is going to be unrealistic pricing expectations. And this is mostly on the home seller side, but it also definitely applies to buyers as well. So when I say unrealistic pricing expectations, I am generally, like I mentioned, referring to sellers who insist on listing their property for more than what it is worth. So when I have a home seller come to me and they say that they want to list their property, my first job is going to be to put together a comparative market analysis to determine what that home is worth. And so when I have that number, I'm going to take that back to the seller and I'm going to see how it compares to what they have in their head. 99 times out of 100, a seller is going to approach a real estate agent with a predetermined price that they want to get out of the property. And so when those two don't line up, it does make make my job a little bit more difficult, because generally speaking, the sellers are not paying attention to all of the information available to them in their market, when they're making this determination. They maybe see one property down the road that sold for a specific number, and now they think that their property is worth that number, even though they don't have the same square footage, they don't have the same number of bedrooms and bathrooms, they don't have a garage, they don't have a backyard, they don't have all of the amenities that the subject property has. And so that's obviously one of my jobs when I'm doing the comparative market analysis, is to take all of the comps in the area, and that, sometimes I like to use a half mile square radius. But I'm also making sure that the comps that I pull are very, very comparable to what the subject property is. Again, I'm not trying to determine a value based on a property that isn't the same as the one that I'm trying to list. And so when the sellers have unrealistic pricing expectations, ultimately we are on you as the seller. And so whatever you want to list your property for is what we're going to list it for. Ultimately, I'm here to give you a guide as to what I think it is worth and what I think it should be listed for. But ultimately, I am a fiduciary, and so I work for you as the client, and I'm going to list your property at whatever price it is. And so ultimately, this is just detrimental for the selling price, the ultimate selling price, in my opinion, because when you list a property that's too high, it comes off not correctly when it's listed on the MLS to potential buyers. When a buyer sees that a property has been on the market for, in our market specifically, more than 2 weeks, honestly, they have a negative connotation about that property. It's either A, listed too high, or B, it's not in very good shape. And so those negative connotations can add up when it's listed too high. And then obviously when it's listed too high and you're not getting the action that you wanted, you're not getting any offers, you ultimately have to come down or make concessions of some sort on that price. And so when buyers are now seeing it's been on the market for a month and it's had 2 price reductions, now in their head, they can, in theory, go in under what it's listed at now, and that is even high or even lower than what you had it listed for originally. Now, if we had it listed at the second price originally, we may get a full price offer within the first couple of days. And while it's not the number that you had in your head to begin with, it's also not a number lower than what I gave you to begin with as well. And so having a property sit on the market can be detrimental in multiple different ways. Obviously, you as the seller, if you've already bought a new property to live in and you're now moving and living in that new property, you still have a mortgage on that old property. And so having 2 mortgages at the same time is never ideal for just financially in general. And that all just can lead back to being listed too high to begin with. Again, if you list it at the normal price, you are generally speaking going to get an offer within 2 days of being listed, whether that's a offer at list or offer over asking. Generally speaking, you're going to get an offer if it's listed correctly and priced correctly. So I just always like to tell clients, you don't want your property sitting on the market for more than 2 weeks. You really don't. It brings negative connotations to the property as a whole, and it just is frustrating for all parties when it's not selling, and you may be in a position to where you need to sell and are starting to make more and more concessions that you maybe didn't necessarily need to make if you didn't list the property unrealistically to begin with. So going backwards a little bit, and in the situation that it kind of applies to buyers, in the market that we're in now, we've had a significant increase in pricing over the last 5 years here in Central Ohio. And so it's taken a little bit of time, I think, for buyers to wrap their head around properties being sold for this much. And so I've had instances where I walk into a property with a buyer and they immediately say, I'm not paying list. And then I just tell them, take a step back, evaluate what's going on. Let me run a comparative market analysis and see what it actually is worth before we start making that determination. Because a lot of times we're going to realize that the property is listed correctly compared to other comparable sales in the area, and most likely these people are going to get an offer at their asking price. And so if you as a buyer want to be competitive, you got to be well aware of what that asking price is, what the prices or what the property is worth as a whole, and just be prepared to make offers at that number as well. So again, happens on both sides of the aisle. I would say it does happen more so with sellers, but definitely can happen with buyers as well.
I love it. It's great information because I know I've had my own experiences. I think we talked about this as well. Just, when you sell things, even your own personal, you always want more, out of it. But, I never really thought about it that way myself either. But that makes a lot of sense. How you can deter or not deter, but, create you know, kind of a thing around the property. When we have people like this all the time. Why has the property been on the market for 21 days? Why has it been on the market for 30 days? We've had buyers ask us that, from time to time. It's like, great question. Did it, is there issues with the property? Is it priced incorrectly? And so that's a great thought, especially when you've had to lower the price multiple times. You know what I'm saying? And so, that's a great point you put there. That why not price it better in the forefront? Try to get a little bit more competitive than have to do several price reductions. And now people think they can come in and lowball you even further. And maybe they're right. Because maybe nobody's going to come pay at that point. You're going to have to take the lowball offer. So good information there.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it for sure.
Well, I mean, I guess that's a great segue because we were talking about unrealistic pricing expectations. But that can get us into my pet peeve number 3, or pet peeve for myself the second. But and that would be unrealistic expectations in the mortgage business. Now, there's a lot to unpack here because we did talk about it a little bit with documentation and such, but you know, we see a lot of different expectations that you come into the mortgage business with as a buyer, and even as realtors sometimes. So, first and foremost, how long do mortgage transactions take? This is something that we commonly see. We'll see buyers who come in and they'll put offers in on properties, or they'll do certain things, and they want us to work like magicians and close transactions in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. We had a client, not a client, but we had an offer that came in about mid-February last month, and they wanted to close on the first Monday of March. I think the total contract time that we had of actual work days was 12, and it was like a 20-day contract for an FHA. There was a lot of other things going on. It was down payment, yeah, it was down payment assistance. And so it's just like you see situations like that. And then what usually happens, because the lender's not involved with writing the contract, the agents will communicate, buyer and seller will communicate. And then what will happen is we'll end up with a contract on our desks that shows a 20-day closing period that nobody really had a conversation with us about or asked us, hey, do you think that this is realistic? It was just, we're going to write this contract and, hopefully you guys can get it done in time. And then, when those expectations aren't met, we're kind of the one who has to fall on the sword, so to say, in that situation. And that's just one thing that can be just a big pet peeve of mine, personally. So just so you guys know, most mortgage transactions are going to take 30 days. I'm not saying that there aren't situations. Again, if you are a cookie cutter borrower, where everything is clear as day, that you can't get a transaction done in 14, 21 days, those do happen. I'm not saying that they don't happen, but every situation is a little bit different. There's also a lot of different factors at play. You have appraisals, you have title work, you have the lender side of things. To expect for all of those things to go perfectly correct to where you can close in 20 days is an unrealistic expectation in any circumstance. And you're ultimately going to be setting yourself up for failure if that is your expectation going in. Again, we as the lender, we are going to do everything in our power to go to war, to go to bat for you, to get this thing done in the timely manner that you need to. But again, we got to set proper expectations from the beginning that getting a loan transaction done when there's multiple different things moving on that transaction can be difficult. There's also not to take into account problems along the way. If the property comes back and has repairs that need to be completed, that right there in and of itself is likely going to take at least an additional 7 days between the repairs actually being done on the property, to sending the appraiser back out to the property to review the repairs, to getting the report back from the appraiser. Typically is going to be from a 7 to 10 day process. So that could cause a delay. If there's title issues, if there's judgments, liens, things against the property that the seller didn't know about, and they now have to go get payoffs for all of these things in order to get clear title, those are things that can take additional time. Not to mention things on the lender side of things. If, we get into the loan and a can of worms opens, and now we have to scramble all around and try to get documentation that wasn't necessarily something we thought was going to have to happen in the beginning. All of these things can happen in a mortgage transaction, and going in with the expectations that, hey, this transaction is going to be tough, it's going to be a little bit difficult, but I have great people around me, I have a great real estate agent, I have a great title company, I have a great lender. Everybody's working in unison to get this deal done. And when everybody's on the board with that expectation, then I feel like it makes the transaction go a lot smoother. And obviously, another thing in this is failure as a lender as well. And we have to wear this. I'll wear this myself personally. We're not always the best in the forefront of, because we want to meet expectations, because we want to go above and beyond for our clients. We do take on these situations sometimes where, again, in that instance, we had a 12 business day contract. And of course, we're not going to say, yeah, we're not going to get this done. We're obviously going to do everything that we can to get it done. But it's just like, sometimes you got to set those expectations in the beginning and say, hey, look, here's what's going on with your loan. You got down payment assistance, you got this, you got that. Those things all take time. We may need a little bit of additional time. We're going to do everything we can, to get this loan closed for you on time. But just so we may end up with needing an extension, and that's normal. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with your loan. That doesn't mean that this isn't going to happen. It's just sometimes this process takes a little bit of extra time. And I feel like if us as the lender, set that expectation up front and had those conversations, it would make things a lot better down the line. You know, Obviously, another thing that goes into this is realtors setting that expectation with their clients. This is more common than you would think. There are real estate agents out there who will tell their clients that they can get this done, or that, the lender that they chose to work with is incapable of doing this, and the lender that they have is better off and could get this done. You know what I'm saying? There's situations like this that come up a lot more than you guys would think. And so that's another just pet peeve of mine that falls under the unrealistic expectations, is real estate agents doing that, to the lender. Ultimately, we are all on a team here, right? We are all trying to get the same goal. The goal is not to, in my opinion, make money. The goal is to help somebody buy a home, to help somebody change their life in that manner. So why does it matter if it takes an additional 10 days? If the goal is ultimately met, if the person is ultimately happy that they got a house, again, and that's I could go on about that one for a while, because that one is a big pet peeve of mine, because oftentimes we turn this business way too much into, about the monetization of it and about the money, and it stops becoming about the client. It stops becoming about the experience, and not everything needs to be done in 14 days. In my opinion, obviously we try to get things done as quickly as possible. But again, some situations need a little bit extra love. Some loans need a little bit of extra love to get across that finish line. And that doesn't make it a bad thing. It just means, hey, we need a little bit of additional time. So setting improper expectations from the real estate side of things makes everything work against itself, in my opinion. I think the real estate agent and the lender should be on the same page for their client, that this is how this should go, and we are trying to get this done. Again, just my opinion.
And ultimately, as the client is choosing their team. They're choosing the real estate agent. They're choosing the lender. The real estate agent isn't choosing the lender for the client. So the client is choosing the lender. And if you, as a real estate agent, are telling your client that they are wrong in who they chose, that just doesn't sit right on all, in my opinion. Just telling somebody that they chose wrong because you know better. It's not very good business practice as a whole. And 9 times out of 10, if the client does listen to them and they end up changing lenders, it's going to take more time on the process as a whole. So it ends up being a negative all in all, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, and again, we can be fair. There's two sides to every story, and sometimes we've had people that have contacted us, buyers that have contacted us and said, "Hey, this loan has gone atrociously with this lender." And those situations do happen. Sometimes you get loans that have been drug out already for 2 weeks, and there's no end in sight, and somebody picks up the phone and says, "Hey, this is the situation. Can you get this done?" We've had loans that we've been able to turn around for people relatively quickly. And again, every situation is a little bit different, but for the most part, most lenders are going to work their butt off to get you to that closing table and to make it happen. And most of them do genuinely care. So that's just one thing that, kind of bothers me. And then other thing is, we talked about in the beginning, amount of paperwork needed. But when you, the client, are fighting your loan officer or fighting your lender at every turn about what they're asking for or what they need, you're ultimately just delaying your process, and you're delaying the inevitable ultimately, because most of the time there's not going to be a workaround for these documents. And so if you spend more of the loan process fighting than helping, I wouldn't be you shouldn't be surprised when your loan drags out longer than it needs to, because again, we're big on this here. We've talked about this in several episodes. Team, team, team. It is a group effort. It is a team effort to get this across the finish line. And just because you, the buyer, are purchasing the home, that doesn't mean that you're not part of the team and that there's not things that are needed from you in order to get this done. And so when your lender asks for documentation, and you spend a day arguing with them on why that documentation shouldn't be needed or why you've already provided this, that, and the other, again, is that overall very productive? And again, the lender should be better. If there's things that they know they're going to need up front and they don't ask for them and they keep coming back, that can get really, really annoying. I do agree. But ultimately, it's all to work in unison. It's all to get the same end goal. Everybody in the transaction is working towards the same end goal, which is for you to buy a house and get to that closing table and own that property. So you know all of that encompassed into that one thing. I think all of those things fit the unrealistic expectations. There's a lot of unrealistic expectations from a lot of different parties, and just I think that going in and understanding that everybody's trying to work towards a common goal, and how can we best you know put our best foot forward to make sure that we reach that common goal. I think that's the way to operate. Not so much as, kind of this war on each other of who can get it done the fastest, or, this isn't going the way I think it should. And so let me try to, take this over here or do this over, it's just, obviously you know, I think it's where can we step up and where can we help? If the buyer's having issues with documents, where can we get involved as a lender to help them with this? Is there anything we can order on our end? Is there anything we can do to help them with this? And so on and so forth. So that's my thoughts. That's just a big one of mine.
Definitely. Great info for sure. Because, and honestly, it just applies in all aspects of life too. Just having the proper expectations, just making sure that you're not expecting the world, and you're not going to be able to get delivered on that. Obviously, that's just going to lead to disappointment. Just make sure you have proper expectations across all aspects of life, across the spectrum for sure.
Yep.
So moving on to my second and final pet peeve here is going to be poorly maintained homes, and this applies again on both sides of the spectrum here for sellers and buyers. Um, when I walk through a property that a seller is wanting to list and it has not been properly maintained over the ownership, it makes it very, very difficult to get it sold, to be honest with you, especially at the price point that the seller is likely wanting to sell it at. If we're walking through and we're seeing, um, cracks in drywall, if we're seeing, flooring that is from the 1980s, if we're seeing appliances from the 1980s, those things are going to be big selling points when buyers walk through your property, and they do absolutely affect the value of your property and affect the final selling price that you're going to get as well. And so I always advise clients when they're looking to sell is to do as many updates as you possibly can. Obviously, I'm not asking you to drop, 30, 40, $50,000 into the property right before you list it, but do as many cosmetic updates as you possibly can to have the property looking as refreshed and nice as you possibly can for prospective buyers when they walk in. Because on the flip side, when I walk into a property with a buyer that we looked at the pictures look really really great because obviously they're professionally done and they are trying to get you in the door to see the property, and then we walk through this property and we see so many cosmetic defects that are just adding up and adding up and adding up. Those prices, obviously it can affect the price that the buyer is willing to offer on. And so when I'm walking through that with a buyer, I'm looking for all those things, and we're going to take notes and we're going to make sure that they're documented when we make this offer. And so obviously we can go back to the seller and justify our price with X, Y, and Z are not updated in this property, and you're using comps down the road that they are updated in, and your price doesn't reflect that as well. So it's just as a homeowner, and we've talked about it in a previous episode, just responsibility of being a homeowner. It's to keep your property in really, or at least good shape. Do all the necessary updates and preventative maintenance to ensure that your property is in showable, good shape prior to listing. Because again, just like when we talked about my first pet peeve with unrealistic pricing expectations, when those things aren't completed, that's going to absolutely affect the sales price and what you end up getting out of your property as well. And so it's very frustrating to me when I see homeowners don't do their responsibilities of being a homeowner. And I've seen really bad instances of it. Backyards not mown, the grass is as long as 12 inches up to the, like, it, you could lose something in the grass. You know what I mean? It just does not present the property in the best light. And obviously buyers are going to see that, buyers agents are going to see that, and it just saves a lot of time and money up front when you get these things looking nice, and do the preventative maintenance up front to make sure that these properties are in good shape. And so um, there really isn't a value that you could put on properly maintaining your home throughout your home ownership. You really can't. Past obviously you living in the home and making sure everything is in working order, there's just not a value that you can put on doing the furnace filters every 90 days, or changing out your shower heads when they get a little bit of rust in them, and water's not coming out of all of the little holes. And so it's just little things like that I notice as an agent when I'm walking through properties, and that I'm absolutely 100% pointing out to buyers as well. So they're making informed decisions on making offers and price and concessions, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a frustrating one for sure for me. It's just like buyers ask me, like, why didn't they do this? And I'm like, I have absolutely no idea, to be honest with you, because it's an easy fix. It's $150, can be done in 2 hours, but they just genuinely didn't want to do it for some reason. And that absolutely has an impact on price. So
Yeah, I think it boils down to care. You got to care about that stuff. And, you know, obviously, I'm not walking through the properties, but I know that a large part of the human population, what do we make decisions off of? What makes us want to purchase things? And that's emotion. And what emotions are, I mean, here's another way to think about it. What emotions are you stirring up in someone as they walk through your property, as they look at it? Are they thinking this is somewhere I could see myself raising kids, or, starting my life? And if they're not feeling that because of things, if you see 12-inch grass outside, I'm going to be immediately appalled. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, nobody wants to walk in some ankle or some calf high, grass. You know what I'm saying? It's just, and it makes it harder for them to complete that vision ultimately. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I think, as a real estate agent, or just as anything in general, what you want somebody to do is envision how much easier or how much better, or what your life would look like with this product. And, ultimately that's what you're selling. You're selling a house, you're selling a product, you're selling something to somebody. And what are you trying to, again, stirring them emotion wise as they're walking through your property? You're probably stirring disgust if they walk in and things are not, at least upkept in a way of like, okay, you couldn't just simply mow your grass, or, sweep the carpet, or, what I'm saying, just simple things that, it's just, it's got to be, the care's got to be there, and you got to recognize, kind of what it is you're doing. Not saying you can't sell the house, but again, a lot of people are probably going to be turned off by that fact, because again, people want to envision. That's why when you go to houses, they do staging, right? That's why That's why people stage houses, because they're trying to stir something inside of you that makes you think, oh my gosh, oh, I could see my couch here. I could see this. I could see this being like this. Oh my gosh, this would be a perfect place for my office, or
This
perfect
is
place for us
home.
to have family over. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? It's like I could host here. And so that's the type of things you're trying to, generate in people. And when you're walking through some grass, up to your calves, yeah, you ain't generating that in me, that's for sure. So it's just it's crazy. So definitely a good one there.
I walked through a property the other day with a buyer, and like some of the wood trim around the doors was just like not nailed in all the way. It was just hanging off like this. I'm like, it's so simple. Grab a hammer, grab a nail, and literally just nail it in. Like, it's so simple.
Yeah.
It's just, but it turned us off. It honestly did. Just seeing those like little things that were not fixed, or, it's just, again, little things matter very much so.
And I think it kind of raises the question, if it's little things, what else have you let go that's been big things?
For
You know what I'm
sure.
saying? If you
Yep.
haven't paid attention to the little things, when you go look at a house, obviously you're looking at a lot of cosmetic, but at me as a buyer, I'm going to start thinking, well, what kind of nuts and bolts of this house are going to have issues? Because if you're neglecting putting a nail into a piece of trim, how much have you neglected, changing out filters or changing out things that are supposed to be done, to work a certain way that are not going to work that way because you haven't done that due diligence? If all it takes is a hammer and a nail, what happens when a project that takes an hour for you to do, you decided to skip because, you weren't going to do that? So that's something I would definitely be, thinking about as well as walking through, is if you're not taking care of the little things, then are you really taking care of the big things?
For sure. For sure. The answer is likely no, to
Yeah.
be honest with you. It's likely no.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know we have it on our list here, like for some honorable mentions, but I don't really have any personally that I can think of. So
I don't either. I just, yeah, those are two big ones that really that have stood out to me, honestly, recently as well. So that just have stood out for sure.
yeah, no, I mean, I think obviously pet peeves usually are a little bit of recency bias. What have you experienced? I know mine was a little bit of recency as well, just based on some experiences I've had with some clients. So you know, but obviously those two things for both of us, I think, are really important. I mean, if you're listening to this, you own a home. Now you know the importance of, hey, please make sure to upkeep your stuff. And if you're somebody who is looking to buy a home, please do not think that this is going to be an easy process. Please don't think that you're just going to give a driver's license and some bank statements and you're going to walk away with $250,000. It's not going to happen. So just don't. I'll just go ahead and let you know right now. Don't set yourself up for failure, because that's what you're doing. And obviously as a lender, that's our job to get in there and let you know those things as well. So, but yeah, that's I think that's all I got for the pet peeves.
I as well. Great episode for sure. Great episode. Hopefully we provided some value to the listeners.
I think we did for sure. Well, guys, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes. Obviously, Zach and I are very appreciative of all the love and support you guys have been showing us through just the different audio platforms, checking us out on YouTube, giving us a follow on Instagram. If you guys are listening, you don't already follow, the Instagram page or any of the pages, please go ahead and give us a follow. I know we're looking to do a giveaway here soon, obviously when the follower count, gets to 100. So if you guys know anybody who you feel like could benefit from these episodes, we would really greatly appreciate just a share, on your friends and family, on your Instagram page, whatever it is. Obviously that's kind of our way of getting our names out there and growing this channel is ultimately just through word of mouth. So anything that you guys can do in that regard, we really really appreciate it. So we've had a lot of fun putting together these episodes and bringing you guys different values. So looking forward to continuing to do so as well. But yeah.
And have a lot more in store too. I know that you mentioned a little bit of a giveaway, but have a lot of ideas that we want to start to implement over the coming weeks, months, and years. So super excited. All in all, hopefully that's been conveyed throughout all of our content, that we're just obviously super excited to be here, and given this value and given this education on the home buying process and real estate and mortgages in general. So appreciate you guys tuning in.
Absolutely. All right, y'all. Well, that's going to wrap it for us. So we'll see you guys on the next episode.